What if the reason you feel empty isn't because your life is bad, but because you've been trying too hard to make it feel good? Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, I just want to be happy? How many times have you forced a smile, repeated positive thoughts, or distracted yourself just to avoid feeling something uncomfortable? You scroll through your phone, looking for something that will lift your mood. You watch videos, listen to advice, follow routines that promise a better mindset. You tell yourself to stay positive, to be grateful, to not let negativity win. And for a moment, it works. But then it fades, and you're back to that same quiet feeling, that same question. Why doesn't this last? Why does happiness feel like something you have to constantly chase, instead of something that stays? Maybe you've even thought this before. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy like everyone else? Why does it feel so hard when it looks so easy for others? So you try harder. You push yourself to improve. You avoid anything that might bring you down. You try to control your thoughts, your emotions, your environment. But instead of feeling better, you feel more tired, more pressured, more disconnected. And here's the part most people don't realize. The more you try to force happiness, the more you become aware of how unhappy you actually feel. So what if the problem isn't your life? What if the problem is the way you're trying to live it? Title: Are you trying too hard to be happy? Inspired by the ideas from the subtle art of not giving a F***ck. Let's be honest, most people are not actually chasing happiness. They're chasing the feeling of not being uncomfortable. There's a difference, because real life isn't built on constant positivity, it's built on contrast. Good days and bad days, wins and failures, confidence and doubt. But somewhere along the way, people started believing that happiness means eliminating the bad parts completely. That if you're doing life right, you should feel good most of the time. And when you don't, you assume something is wrong. Look at a real situation. You wake up in the morning already feeling a bit off. Not terrible, just not great. But instead of accepting that, your mind immediately reacts. Why do I feel like this? I shouldn't feel like this. Let me fix this. So you grab your phone. You look for something motivating. You try to shift your mood. Now you're not just feeling off. You're stressed about feeling off. And that's where the cycle begins. Or think about this. You're at work or school. Everyone around you seems fine, smiling, talking, functioning. But inside you feel tired, maybe even a little lost. Instead of acknowledging that, you put on a version of yourself that looks okay. You laugh when you're supposed to. You respond when you're expected to. You act like everything's under control. But deep down, there's this quiet pressure building. Because you're not just living anymore, you're performing. Here's another one. You achieve something. Maybe you finish a big task, reach a goal, get something you've been wanting, and for a moment it feels good, but then it fades, and suddenly you're back to asking, what's next? Why don't I feel as happy as I thought I would? So you set another goal, and another, and another, hoping that the next one will finally be enough, but it never is. So let me ask you something. How long have you been trying to fix your emotions instead of understanding them? How long have you been chasing happiness without questioning what it actually means? And what if the reason it feels so exhausting is because it's not supposed to work that way? Here's the truth most people avoid. You are not supposed to feel good all the time. You are supposed to feel everything: stress, doubt, frustration, uncertainty, not because life is broken, but because that's what makes it real. The problem is we've been taught to treat negative emotions like enemies, something to remove, something to fix, something to avoid. But what if those feelings aren't the problem? What if the real problem is your resistance to them? Because every time you say, "I shouldn't feel this way," you create a second layer of suffering. Now you're not just sad. You're frustrated that you're sad. Now you're not just tired. You're disappointed in yourself for being tired. Let's shift the perspective. Instead of asking, "How do I feel better?" ask yourself, "What am I trying to avoid right now?" Is it failure, rejection, uncertainty, being misunderstood? Because the moment you stop running from those things, you start to understand yourself better. Another important question: what are you choosing to care about? Because whether you realize it or not, you're always choosing. You're choosing to care about people's opinions. You're choosing to care about being perfect. You're choosing to care about avoiding mistakes. But are those things actually worth your energy? Or are they just draining you? Here's a real shift. Happiness doesn't come from removing problems. It comes from choosing better problems. Problems that mean something, struggles that lead somewhere, growth that feels uncomfortable but real. Imagine two people. One spends their life trying to avoid failure. They play it safe, avoid risks, stay comfortable. The other accepts that failure is part of the process. They try, they fail, they learn, they grow. Both experience discomfort, but only one of them moves forward. So instead of asking, "How do I be happy?" ask, "What kind of life is worth the struggle? What kind of pain am I willing to go through? What actually matters to me beyond just feeling good?" Because the truth is simple. If your only goal is to feel good all the time, you will feel worse. But if your goal is to live honestly, to face reality, even when it's uncomfortable, to choose meaning over constant pleasure, something changes. You stop chasing happiness and you start experiencing life fully and ironically. That's when happiness shows up, not because you forced it, but because you made space for it. So maybe the real question is, why am I not happy? Maybe the real question is, am I trying too hard to be? Because if you really think about it, when was the last time you just let yourself feel something? Without trying to change it, not improve it, not analyze it, not escape it, just feel it. We live in a world that constantly tells you to upgrade your emotions. Feeling sad, watch something uplifting. Feeling lost, find your purpose immediately. Feeling tired, push harder, stay productive. There's always a solution, always a fix, always a next step. But what if not everything needs to be fixed? Think about a moment when you felt genuinely overwhelmed, not the kind you post about, not the kind you turn into motivation, but the quiet kind. The one where you're alone and everything feels heavy. What did you do? Did you sit with it? Or did you immediately try to escape? Through your phone? Through distractions? Through pretending it wasn't there? Here's something uncomfortable to admit. Most people are not afraid of being unhappy. They're afraid of sitting still long enough to realize why. And that's why trying too hard to be happy becomes dangerous, because it turns your life into a constant escape. You're always moving away from something, never actually facing it. Let's talk about another real-life scenario. You're in a conversation with someone important, maybe a friend, maybe someone you care about. But instead of being present, you're thinking, am I saying the right thing? Do they like me? Do I sound interesting enough? You're not actually connecting, you're performing, trying to control how you're perceived, trying to avoid any form of rejection, and because of that, you miss the moment entirely. So let me ask you this. How many moments in your life have you missed? Because you were too busy trying to make them perfect. Here's another truth. The more you try to control everything, the less control you actually feel, because life doesn't respond well to control. It responds to acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding reality as it is. You feel anxious sometimes. That's real. You feel uncertain. That's real. You don't have everything figured out. That's real. And none of those things mean you're failing. But when you constantly tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way, you create conflict, and that conflict is what drains you, not the emotion itself. Let's go deeper. Why do you want to be happy so badly? Is it because you truly understand what happiness means? Or is it because you're trying to escape something else? Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's insecurity. Maybe it's fear of not being enough. Because sometimes the desire to be happy is just a mask for the fear of facing what hurts. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. Avoiding that pain doesn't remove it. It delays it, and often makes it stronger. So instead of running, try asking yourself, what am I avoiding right now? What truth am I not willing to face? And what feeling am I trying to replace with happiness? Because clarity doesn't come from forcing positivity. It comes from honesty. Another shift you need to understand. You don't build a meaningful life by chasing good feelings. You build it by committing to something that matters, even when it doesn't feel good. Think about people who are truly fulfilled, not the ones who look perfect online, but the ones who feel grounded. They don't have perfect lives. They have meaningful struggles. They care about something enough to deal with the difficulty that comes with it. So maybe the goal isn't to feel happy all the time. Maybe the goal is to find something worth struggling for. Let me ask you something important. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, same habits, same mindset, same patterns, would you be okay with that? Or would that scare you? Because if it scares you, that's not a sign to chase happiness harder. That's a sign to change what you're prioritizing. Stop trying to feel better all the time. Start trying to live better. And those are not the same thing. Living better means being honest when something isn't working, facing discomfort instead of avoiding it, letting go of things that don't matter, taking responsibility for what does. It means understanding that you can feel anxious and still move forward. You can feel uncertain and still take action. You can feel lost and still find your way, because emotions are not instructions, they're experiences. And the moment you stop treating every negative feeling as something to fix, you create space to think clearly, space to act intentionally, space to actually live. So here's where everything comes together. You don't need to chase happiness. You need to stop running from discomfort. You don't need to control every emotion. You need to understand them. You don't need a perfect life. You need a meaningful one. And maybe, just maybe, the reason happiness feels so far away is because you've been looking for it in a place it was never meant to be. So ask yourself honestly, are you trying to live your life? Or are you trying to control how it feels? Because the moment you stop trying so hard to be happy might be the exact moment you finally start to feel something real. And here's something even deeper to think about. What if happiness was never meant to be the goal? What if it was just a side effect? Look at the moments in your life that actually felt meaningful, not just good, but real. Moments where you struggled, moments where things were uncertain, moments where you didn't know the outcome, but you kept going anyway. Those moments weren't comfortable, but they mattered. So why is it that we try so hard to remove discomfort when some of the most meaningful parts of life come from it? Think about this. A student studying late at night, exhausted, overwhelmed, questioning if it's all worth it. An athlete pushing through pain, failure, and doubt just to improve. Someone working a job they don't fully enjoy yet because they're building something for their future. None of these moments feel happy in the moment, but they carry meaning. Now compare that to this: scrolling endlessly through your phone, watching video after video, looking for something that makes you feel better, avoiding silence, avoiding your thoughts, avoiding yourself. That feels easier, but does it feel meaningful? So let me ask you something real. Are you chasing comfort, or are you building a life? Because those two paths are not the same. Comfort will keep you safe, but it will also keep you stuck. And this is where most people get trapped. They think happiness comes from removing discomfort, so they avoid difficult conversations, avoid taking risks, avoid anything that might make them feel exposed. But in doing that, they also avoid growth, connection, depth, because real connection requires vulnerability. Real growth requires failure. Real confidence requires facing situations where you might not feel confident at all. So if you're constantly trying to feel good, you might be unintentionally avoiding the exact experiences that would actually make your life better. Here's another angle. Think about your relationships. Have you ever held back what you really wanted to say, just to keep things smooth? Have you ever pretended to be okay, just so you wouldn't create tension? Have you ever stayed silent, even when something mattered to you? In those moments, you chose comfort over honesty, and maybe it worked in the short term. But what did it cost you? Because every time you avoid discomfort, you trade authenticity for temporary peace, and over time that builds up. You start to feel disconnected, not just from others, but from yourself. So ask yourself this: am I living in a way that's honest, or just in a way that feels easy? Now let's talk about expectations, because a big reason why people feel unhappy is not their reality. It's the gap between their expectations and their reality. You expect life to feel exciting. You expect yourself to always be motivated. You expect things to go according to plan. But life doesn't follow expectations. It follows reality. And reality includes boredom, routine, delays, failures, awkward moments, doubt. So when you expect everything to feel good, normal life starts to feel like a problem. But what if you changed that? What if you stopped expecting life to feel amazing and started accepting it for what it is? Suddenly, things shift. A normal day feels enough. A small win feels meaningful. A quiet moment feels peaceful instead of empty, because you're no longer measuring your life against unrealistic standards. Here's another question. Are you trying to be happy? Or are you trying to avoid being uncomfortable? Because those are not the same. Avoiding discomfort leads to distraction. Chasing happiness leads to pressure. But accepting both leads to freedom. Freedom to feel without judgment. Freedom to act without overthinking every outcome. Freedom to exist without constantly trying to improve every second. And that's something people don't talk about enough. You don't have to optimize every part of your life. You don't have to turn every moment into progress. You don't have to constantly become a better version of yourself. Sometimes, you just need to live, not perfectly, not optimally, but honestly, so the next time you feel off, instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" try asking, "What is this feeling trying to show me?" The next time you feel uncomfortable, instead of escaping it, ask, "Is this discomfort actually harmful, or is it just unfamiliar?" And the next time you catch yourself trying too hard to be happy, pause and ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped trying for a moment? Because maybe, just maybe, the peace you're looking for isn't something you have to chase. It's something that shows up when you stop running. So take a breath. Let go of the pressure. Stop trying to control every emotion. Stop trying to force every moment to feel right. And just be here, in this moment, as it is. Because happiness was never meant to be something you hold onto forever. It was meant to come and go, just like everything else. And the more you accept that, the less you'll need to chase it. So in the end, it all comes back to one simple question. Not how do I become happy, but am I trying too hard to be? Because at some point, you have to face this honestly. How much of your life has been spent trying to feel a certain way, instead of actually living? From the moment you wake up, there's already pressure. Pressure to feel motivated. Pressure to feel positive. Pressure to feel like you're moving forward. And when you don't feel those things, you start questioning yourself. Why am I like this? Why can't I just get it together? Why does everything feel harder than it should? But what if it's not supposed to feel easy all the time? What if the expectation that it should be easy is exactly what's making it feel so heavy? Look at your daily life. There are moments where things feel slow, moments where you feel unmotivated, moments where you doubt yourself, and instead of seeing those as normal, you treat them like problems. So you try to fix them. You look for something to boost your mood. You search for something to inspire you. You distract yourself just enough to not feel uncomfortable. But here's what happens. Every time you escape a feeling, you train yourself to fear it. And over time, even the smallest discomfort starts to feel overwhelming. Not because it's actually that bad, but because you've never allowed yourself to sit with it. So let me ask you something directly. What are you afraid will happen? If you stop trying to feel happy all the time, will you fall apart? Will everything collapse? Or will you finally see things clearly for what they are? Because clarity doesn't come from constant positivity. It comes from honesty. Honesty about where you are. Honesty about how you feel. Honesty about what's not working. And honesty is uncomfortable. That's why most people avoid it. It's easier to say, "I'm fine," than to admit, "I'm confused." It's easier to stay busy than to sit in silence and think. It's easier to chase distractions than to face what's actually bothering you. But every time you choose comfort over truth, you move further away from understanding yourself. And without understanding yourself, how can you expect to feel genuinely okay? Here is something most people overlook. You don't feel lost because your life is meaningless. You feel lost because you're disconnected from what actually matters to you. And that disconnection often comes from caring about the wrong things, caring too much about how you're perceived, caring too much about avoiding mistakes, caring too much about feeling good all the time. But the more you try to control those things, the more unstable your sense of self becomes, because those things are not stable. People's opinions change, circumstances change, emotions change. So if your sense of happiness depends on things that constantly change, you will constantly feel unstable. That's why this question matters so much. What are you building your life on? Is it validation? Is it comfort? Is it temporary feelings? Or is it something deeper? Because real stability doesn't come from feeling good all the time. It comes from knowing what matters to you, even when you don't feel good. Let's bring this into a real situation. Imagine you're working on something important, a goal, a project, something that actually means something to you. At first, you're excited. But then it gets hard. You feel stuck. You feel frustrated. You start doubting yourself. Now you have two choices. You can stop, distract yourself, and try to feel better, or you can stay, feel the discomfort, and keep going anyway. The first choice gives you temporary relief. The second choice gives you growth. But growth doesn't feel good in the moment. That's why so many people avoid it. And that's the trap. You think you're chasing happiness, but you're actually avoiding growth. So let's ask a better question. What kind of discomfort is worth it to you? What kind of struggle would you choose if you knew it would lead to something meaningful? Because that's where your direction comes from. Not from what feels good, but from what feels worth it. Now think about your relationships again. Not just how they look, but how they feel. Are you able to be honest? Or are you constantly filtering yourself? Are you able to express what matters to you? Or are you holding back to keep things comfortable? Because real connection doesn't come from perfection. It comes from honesty. And honesty is risky. It can lead to rejection, misunderstanding, conflict. But it can also lead to something real, something deeper than surface-level comfort. So again, ask yourself, am I choosing comfort or connection? Because you can't always have both. Let's go even deeper. Think about your identity, who you think you are. How much of that identity is built on what you think you should be? Successful, confident, always improving, always positive. And how much of it is actually based on who you are right now? Not idealized, not filtered, but real. Because the more you chase an ideal version of yourself, the more you reject your current self. And that creates a constant sense of not being enough. So no matter what you achieve, no matter how much you improve, It never feels like it's enough, because you're always comparing yourself to something unrealistic. So what happens if you stop? Not stop growing, but stop rejecting where you are. What happens if you say, "This is where I am. This is how I feel, and that's okay." Not as an excuse, but as a starting point. Because growth built on self-rejection feels exhausting, but growth built on self-acceptance feels sustainable. And that changes everything. Now let's bring it all together. You don't need to chase happiness. You need to stop making it the standard for every moment of your life. You don't need to eliminate discomfort. You need to understand which discomfort is worth experiencing. You don't need to control every emotion. You need to stop being controlled by them, because emotions will come and go. That's their nature. But meaning is something you choose. You choose what matters. You choose what to care about. You choose what struggles are worth facing. And once you make those choices, happiness stops being something you chase. It becomes something that appears in the middle of a life that feels real. So the next time you feel that pressure to be happy, to feel better, to fix everything immediately, pause and ask yourself, what am I really trying to control right now? What am I afraid to feel? What actually matters in this moment? And maybe, instead of trying to change how you feel, you simply allow it, because in that space, without pressure, without force, without constant correction, you might finally experience something different, not perfect happiness, not endless positivity, but something more real, more grounded, more lasting. And that might be exactly what you've been looking for all along. So in the end, the question stays the same. Not how do I become happy, but are you trying too hard to be? And if you stay with that question long enough, you start to notice something. Most of your stress doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from your resistance to it. You resist feeling tired. You resist feeling uncertain. You resist feeling like you're not where you should be. And that resistance creates tension, not just mentally, but emotionally. It feels like you're constantly pushing against your own experience. That's exhausting, because instead of moving through life, you're fighting it. Think about how often you say things like, "I shouldn't feel this way. I need to fix this. I need to get back on track." Those thoughts seem productive, but what they actually do is turn your current experience into a problem. Now you're not just living, you're constantly correcting, constantly adjusting, constantly trying to bring yourself back to some ideal state that doesn't actually exist. So let's stop for a moment and ask something simple. What if there is no perfect state to return to? What if this right here is just part of the process? Because life doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in cycles. High energy, low energy, clarity, confusion, progress, setbacks. And none of those phases are wrong. They're all necessary. But when you expect yourself to always feel on, every natural dip feels like failure. That's why you feel behind sometimes. Not because you actually are, but because you're comparing your current state to a version of yourself that's unrealistic. So here's a different way to look at it. Instead of asking, "Why am I not at my best right now?" ask, What phase am I in? And what does this phase require from me? Because not every phase requires intensity. Some phases require rest. Some require patience. Some require reflection. But if you treat every phase like it should be productive and exciting, you end up burning out. And burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from trying to feel a certain way for too long, trying to stay motivated all the time, trying to stay positive all the time, trying to stay in control all the time. That's not sustainable. So what happens when you let go of that? You start to move with your life instead of against it. When you feel tired, you acknowledge it. When you feel uncertain, you explore it. When you feel lost, you don't panic. You observe, and in that observation, you gain something most people never allow themselves to have: understanding. Because when you stop reacting to every emotion, you start learning from them. You realize that feeling lost often means you're outgrowing something. Feeling anxious often means you care about something. Feeling uncomfortable often means you're stepping into something new. And suddenly, those feelings are no longer enemies. They're signals, signals that guide you, not perfectly, but honestly. Now think about how different your life would feel if you stopped trying to silence those signals. If instead of saying, "I need to get rid of this feeling," you said, "What is this trying to show me?" That one shift can change everything, because now you're not running anymore, you're listening. And when you listen, you start to make better choices, not choices based on fear, not choices based on pressure, but choices based on awareness. And awareness creates clarity. Clarity about what matters, clarity about what doesn't, clarity about where your energy should go. And once you have that clarity, you naturally start to let go. You let go of trying to impress everyone. You let go of trying to control every outcome. You let go of trying to feel perfect all the time, not because someone told you to, but because you see it's not necessary. And when you let go of those things, you create space, space to breathe, space to think, space to actually experience your life as it is, not filtered, not forced, not controlled, just real. And in that space, something unexpected happens. You start to feel okay. Even when things aren't perfect, you start to feel calm. Even when things are uncertain, you start to feel grounded. Even when life is messy, and that kind of feeling is very different from the happiness you were chasing before. It's not intense, it's not constant excitement, it's quiet, stable, real, and that's the kind of peace you don't have to force. So maybe the goal was never to be happy all the time. Maybe the goal was to become someone who can handle whatever they feel, someone who doesn't run from discomfort, someone who doesn't collapse under pressure, someone who doesn't need everything to feel good, to feel okay. Because when you reach that point, happiness becomes something different. It's no longer something you chase. It's something that visits. In moments you didn't try to control. A conversation that feels real. A moment of quiet where your mind isn't racing. A sense of progress, even if it's small. And you notice it more. Because you're not desperately searching for it anymore. So take a step back. Look at your life honestly. Where are you forcing things? Where are you trying too hard? Where are you exhausting yourself? Just to feel a certain way, and then ask yourself, what would happen if I loosened my grip just a little? Not give up, not stop caring, just stop forcing, because sometimes the thing you've been chasing the hardest is the thing that only shows up when you finally let it go. And maybe that's what this has been about all along, not finding happiness, but removing everything that was making it feel impossible. So, in the end, there's nothing left to chase, nothing left to force, just one final question to sit with. Are you living your life? Or are you trying to control how it feels? And if you really sit with that question, you might notice something uncomfortable. A lot of what you call trying to be happy is actually just trying to stay in control. Control over your thoughts, control over your emotions, control over how your life is supposed to look. You want things to go a certain way. You want to feel a certain way. And when reality doesn't match that, you feel frustrated. But here's the truth. Life doesn't follow your expectations. It unfolds on its own terms. And the more you try to force it into a specific shape, the more resistance you feel. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter your grip, the faster it slips away. And happiness works the same way. The more you try to hold onto it, the more unstable it becomes. So what happens if you stop gripping so tightly? Not in a careless way, but in a grounded way. You still care. You still move forward. You still build your life. But you stop demanding that every moment feel a certain way. You allow good moments to be good without fearing when they'll end. You allow difficult moments to exist without immediately trying to escape them. And in doing that, you remove the constant pressure, because now you're not measuring your life by how good it feels every second. You're experiencing it as it is, and that changes your relationship with everything. Failure stops feeling like something to avoid and starts feeling like something you can learn from. Rejection stops feeling like something that defines you and starts feeling like something that guides you. Uncertainty stops feeling like something dangerous and starts feeling like something natural, because it is. Life has always been uncertain. You've just been trying to make it feel certain, and that effort, that constant attempt to stabilize everything, is what's been draining you. So imagine this. Imagine waking up and not immediately judging how you feel, not labeling it as good or bad, not trying to fix it, just noticing it. Imagine going through your day without constantly checking if you're happy yet, without asking, is this working? And without wondering, should I feel better by now? Just doing what matters, handling what's in front of you, responding to life as it comes. Imagine facing a difficult moment, and instead of saying, I need to get out of this, you say, let me see what this is. No panic, no rush, just awareness. How different would that feel? Because that's what it looks like. To stop trying so hard. It doesn't mean your life becomes perfect. It means your experience becomes lighter, because you're no longer carrying the weight of constant expectation. You're no longer chasing a feeling that was never meant to stay. You're no longer fighting parts of yourself that were never meant to be eliminated. You're just living, and in that space, there's something quiet, something steady, not excitement, not intensity, but peace, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on everything going right, the kind of peace that stays, even when things don't. And that kind of peace is far more powerful than the happiness you were chasing before, because it doesn't come from control. It comes from acceptance, acceptance of your thoughts, acceptance of your emotions, acceptance of your reality, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped needing it to be. So maybe the reason you've been feeling stuck isn't because you're doing life wrong. Maybe it's because you've been trying to make life feel right all the time. And maybe that was never the point. So take a moment, not to fix anything, not to improve anything, just to notice. Notice where you are. Notice what you feel. Notice what you've been trying to control, and gently ask yourself, what if I didn't have to control this? What if this moment is already enough to experience? What if I stopped trying to feel better and just allowed myself to be here? Because sometimes that's all it takes. Not a breakthrough, not a perfect plan, just a shift from control to acceptance, from pressure to presence, from chasing happiness to allowing life. And in that shift, you may not suddenly feel amazing, but you will feel something real. And over time, that realness becomes grounding. That grounding becomes stability. And that stability becomes a kind of peace you don't have to chase anymore. So, in the end, after all the effort, all the searching, all the trying, you're left with something simple, a question that doesn't demand an answer, but invites honesty. Are you still trying to be happy? Or are you finally ready to just live? And there's one more thing most people never question, not just how they're trying to be happy, but why they believe they need to be happy all the time in the first place. Where did that idea come from? Was it something you truly discovered for yourself? Or was it something you absorbed from what you see around you? Because if you look closely, you're constantly surrounded by images of what happiness is supposed to look like. People smiling, people winning, people living exciting, perfect-looking lives. And over time, you start to believe that's the standard. So when your life feels ordinary, or difficult, or uncertain, you assume something is wrong. But what you don't see is everything behind those moments. The doubt, the struggle, the confusion, because those parts don't get shown. So you end up comparing your full reality to someone else's highlight. And that creates pressure. Pressure to feel more, be more, do more. But here's the truth. A meaningful life is not always an exciting life. Sometimes it's repetitive, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean it's wrong, it means it's real. So let's ask something deeper. Are you chasing happiness? Or are you chasing an image of what happiness should look like? Because those are two very different things. Another layer to this. Control doesn't just show up in your emotions. It shows up in your decisions. How often do you hesitate? Because you're trying to make the right choice. You overthink. You analyze every outcome. You try to predict how you'll feel later, and in doing that, you delay action, not because you don't know what to do, but because you're afraid of how it might feel if it goes wrong. So instead of moving forward, you stay stuck in indecision, and that indecision feels safe, but it also keeps you in the same place. So here's a better question. What if there is no perfect choice? What if every path comes with uncertainty? Because it does. Every decision leads to new problems, new challenges, new discomfort. But that's not something to avoid. That's something to accept. Because once you accept that no choice is perfect, you become free to choose based on what matters, not based on what feels safest. And that changes how you live. You stop waiting for certainty. You stop needing guarantees. You start moving, even when things are unclear. And ironically, that's where confidence comes from. Not from feeling ready, but from acting anyway. Now let's go even deeper. There's a hidden belief behind trying too hard to be happy, and it sounds like this: if I don't feel good, something is wrong with my life. But what if that belief is the problem? Because life is not designed to feel good all the time. It's designed to challenge you, shape you, test you. And those experiences don't always feel good, but they serve a purpose. So instead of asking, why do I feel bad? Try asking, what is this experience shaping me into? Because every difficulty carries a lesson, not in a forced motivational way, but in a real, grounded way. Struggle teaches you what matters. Failure teaches you where you stand. Discomfort teaches you where you can grow. And when you stop rejecting those experiences, you start using them. Another important shift. You don't need to always understand your life while you're in it. Sometimes you won't know why things feel confusing. Sometimes you won't have clarity. Sometimes you won't feel like you're progressing. And that's okay. Because meaning is often something you see in hindsight. But if you demand clarity in every moment, you create frustration. So instead of needing to understand everything now, allow things to unfold. Let your life make sense over time. Instead of forcing it to make sense immediately, now think about this. How much pressure would disappear if you stopped expecting yourself to have everything figured out? How much lighter would things feel if you accepted that uncertainty is part of the process? Because right now, a lot of your stress doesn't come from your situation. It comes from your expectation that you should already have the answers, but you don't. And you're not supposed to. You're supposed to figure things out by living, by trying, by failing, by adjusting, not by thinking everything through perfectly. So maybe, instead of trying to build a life that feels good all the time, you build a life that you're willing to experience fully, a life where you can handle discomfort, a life where you can face uncertainty, a life where you can move forward without needing constant reassurance. Because that kind of life doesn't just make you feel better, it makes you stronger, more grounded, more real. And from that place, happiness is no longer something fragile. It becomes something that comes and goes, without shaking your entire world. And that's the difference. When you try too hard to be happy, your stability depends on how you feel. But when you stop forcing it, Your stability comes from how you live, from your values, your choices, your willingness to face reality. And that's something emotions can't take away from you. So now, after everything, after all the effort, all the pressure, all the trying, you're left with something simpler, something quieter, but far more powerful. You don't need to feel perfect. You don't need to feel happy all the time. You don't need to control every part of your experience. You just need to be willing to live it fully, honestly, without constantly trying to escape it. And maybe that's the shift from chasing a feeling to building a life, from avoiding discomfort to choosing meaning, from trying to be happy to understanding that happiness was never the destination. It was always just a moment within the journey. So now, one last time, ask yourself, and answer it honestly. Are you still trying to be happy? Or are you finally ready to experience your life as it is? Turning point, when you finally realize what's not working. At some point, you don't just feel tired, you feel done. Done with forcing things, done with pretending everything is okay, done with trying to convince yourself that you're happy when you're not. And this moment, it doesn't feel like motivation. It feels like stillness, because you've reached a point where trying harder no longer makes sense. You've followed the advice. You've applied the routines. You've tried to fix your mindset again and again. And yet, you're still here, still questioning, still searching, still feeling like something isn't clicking. And that's when something uncomfortable begins to surface. Not a solution, not a breakthrough, but a realization. What if I've been approaching this the wrong way the entire time? That thought doesn't give you answers, but it removes illusions. Because now, instead of asking, what else can I do? You start asking, why hasn't any of this worked? And that question forces you to look at something deeper, not your circumstances, not your results, but your patterns, the way you react when things don't feel right, the way you rush to fix every uncomfortable emotion, the way you avoid anything that challenges your sense of control. And slowly, you begin to see it. You weren't trying to be happy. You were trying to avoid feeling anything that wasn't happiness. And that changes everything, because now you realize you weren't chasing something. You were running from something, running from discomfort, running from uncertainty, running from the parts of life that don't feel good. And the more you ran, the more sensitive you became to those feelings, until even the smallest discomfort felt overwhelming. That's when it hits you. It's not your life that's making you feel this way. It's your relationship with your experience. And for a moment, that realization is heavy, because it means there's nothing external to fix. No perfect routine, no perfect mindset, no perfect situation, just you. And how you respond to what you feel. And for most people, that's where they turn away. Because it's easier to keep searching for solutions than to face that level of responsibility. But this time, you don't turn away, you stay. Even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's unfamiliar, you stay. And that's where the real shift begins. You start noticing your impulses. The urge to check your phone the moment you feel bored. The urge to distract yourself when things feel quiet. the urge to escape when emotions start to rise, but instead of acting on them, you pause not to control them, not to suppress them, but to see them, and in that space, something new appears, choice for the first time. You realize you don't have to react automatically. You don't have to follow every impulse. You don't have to fix every feeling. You can simply be with it. And at first, it's uncomfortable because you're not used to it. You're used to movement, to distraction, to doing something, anything to change how you feel. But now you're doing the opposite. You're allowing boredom to exist, allowing uncertainty to exist, allowing discomfort to exist. And something surprising happens. It doesn't destroy you. It doesn't overwhelm you the way you expected. It just passes, slowly, naturally. And that's when you realize something powerful. The feeling was never the problem. Your resistance to it was. That realization doesn't come with excitement. It comes with relief. Because now there's less to fight. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to feel good all the time. You don't have to chase a constant state of happiness. You just have to be willing to experience what's already there. And from that willingness, everything starts to change. You begin to approach your life differently when something goes wrong. You don't immediately label it as bad. You look at it, you understand it, you respond to it when you feel off. You don't panic, you ask, what's actually happening right now? And that question brings clarity, because now you're not reacting blindly, you're responding consciously, and that changes your direction. You start making choices based on what matters, not based on what feels comfortable in the moment. You take actions that are difficult, but meaningful. You face situations you used to avoid, not because you suddenly feel confident, but because you're no longer controlled by discomfort. And that's when something deeper begins to form, not happiness, but stability, a sense that no matter what you feel, you can handle it, a sense that no matter what happens, you won't collapse under it. And that kind of stability is far more powerful than temporary happiness, because it stays. It doesn't disappear the moment life gets hard. It grows stronger through it. And from that place, you start to understand something clearly. You were never supposed to eliminate discomfort. You were supposed to build the capacity to face it. And that changes the goal completely. You're no longer trying to feel good all the time. You're becoming someone who can move forward regardless of how you feel. And in that shift, there's freedom. Freedom from constant pressure. Freedom from unrealistic expectations. Freedom from the need to control every moment. And in that freedom, you find something unexpected, a sense of calm, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer fighting what isn't, and maybe that's the real turning point, not when your life changes, but when your relationship with it does. Because once that changes, everything else starts to follow. And from here, you don't go back, because now you see it clearly. You don't need to try harder to be happy. You just needed to stop trying so hard to avoid being human. A lesson learned. What this really teaches you. At the end of all this, you realize something simple but difficult to accept. Happiness was never the thing you were supposed to chase, because the more you chased it, the more pressure you created. the more you tried to feel good all the time. The more you became aware of when you didn't, and that's the first lesson. You are not meant to feel good all the time. You are meant to feel everything. The second lesson is this: not everything in your life deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your energy. When you try to care about everything, you end up overwhelmed, drained, lost. But when you choose carefully what actually matters, life becomes clearer. So the real skill is not learning how to feel better. It's learning what is worth caring about. The third lesson is something most people avoid. You cannot avoid problems. You can only choose better ones. Every life comes with struggle. Every path comes with difficulty. But some struggles are meaningless, and some are meaningful. Chasing validation, approval, and comfort leads to empty struggles. But building something real, facing challenges, and growing through discomfort, that leads somewhere. So the question is not, how do I avoid pain? But, what kind of pain is worth it to me? The fourth lesson is about control. You don't control everything that happens to you. You don't control every emotion that shows up. But you do control how you respond. And that's where your power is. Not in forcing yourself to feel good, but in choosing how you handle what you feel. The fifth lesson is acceptance. Not giving up, not settling, but understanding that life is imperfect, that you are imperfect, that things won't always go your way, and instead of fighting that, you work with it, because the moment you stop resisting reality, you suffer less. And finally, the most important lesson of all, you don't need a perfect life to feel okay. You don't need constant happiness. You don't need everything to go right. What you need is a sense of meaning, a direction, something that matters enough for you to face the hard parts of life without running away. Because in the end, a meaningful life is not always a comfortable life, but it is a life that feels real, grounded, worth living. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's this: stop trying to feel good all the time. Start choosing what's worth your energy. Because when you do that, you don't just feel better, you live better. And now, you've seen it from a different perspective. Not the version of life that tells you to chase happiness endlessly, but the version that asks you to slow down, to reflect, and to question what truly matters. Because at the end of the day, this was never just about happiness. It was about understanding yourself, understanding what you care about, what you've been avoiding, what you've been holding on to that no longer serves you. And maybe, after everything you've heard, you don't walk away with perfect clarity, but you walk away with something better. Awareness of your patterns, awareness of your thoughts, awareness of the way you've been living. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin again, not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly. So as you move forward from here, don't ask yourself how to be happy all the time. Ask yourself something real. What actually matters to me? What am I willing to go through for it? And what am I finally ready to let go of? Because the moment you start answering those questions is the moment your life begins to change. Call to action, YouTube channel outro. And if this message resonated with you, if this made you stop, and think. If this gave you a new way of seeing your life, then this is just the beginning. There are more ideas to explore, more perspectives to understand, more truths that can change the way you think and the way you live. So if you want more content like this, more deep, thought-provoking audiobook-style insights, more stories and lessons that challenge the way you see the world, make sure to follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Midnight Silence Audiobooks, because this space is built for people who are ready to think deeper, to grow quietly, and to understand life beyond the surface. Stay with us, and we'll keep exploring these ideas together. Until next time, just remember, you don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to be willing to face what's real.